HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Hey guys, this is Gabby Douglas. If you have an active lifestyle like me, hydration is key. That's why I love the Hydration Watermelon Smoothie from Smoothie King. Blended with whole fruits, coconut water, and more electrolytes than some of the leading sports drinks. Hydration Watermelon is the cleaner way to hydrate, with no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. So you can recover and perform at your peak ability during the summer heat. Order online or through the app for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King, rule the day.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business. Whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing, guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. You probably know that Audible.com is a leading provider of audiobooks, but you may not know they have a lot of other audio content as well. So we're offering a free trial, so you can check it out. Just go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth. Sign up for the trial and go exploring. I think you'll find an awful lot of really valuable content that you didn't know was there. This podcast has been fortunate to have gained a continuous recognition as a great resource for sales professionals, small business owners, business leaders of all kinds. And it's really because I've been fortunate enough to have some incredible people join me as guests. They come on, we have a great conversation where they share their expertise with all of you so that you can get the information and the answers that you are looking for your business. You can take that information, you can implement, you can reach out to these folks, and that way you can do better things in your business than maybe you were doing before. Today is no different. My guest today is Dr. Michael Colburn. Michael has built his career on performance improvement at the organization, team, and individual levels for a broad range of clients in the private and public sectors for more than 30 years. He recently retired as an associate professor of management at Ashland University, where he taught organizational development, operations management, strategic management, and self-management and accountability. Michael has authored numerous papers in academic, professional, and trade publications, and we are thrilled to have him here with us today. Thanks so much for joining me, Michael.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Me too, and we are going to be talking about what I think is going to be a fascinating subject, which is self-management and accountability. And so I would like to start at the ground floor and ask you to explain what is self-management and why is it important?
Well, I would define self-management as the ability and the will to act in the best interest of the organization in such a way that intrinsic motivation replaces any external consequences, either to reward or punish behavior. And that's kind of, and I've found that it's important for a couple of reasons, and actually more. For the individual, it really is a strength-based approach. When we were in a job, I remember when I wrote my book, the first line that came out was, work really ought to be fun. And fun happens when we're doing things that we're really good at, we have strength, and also we have a passion for. And when that happens, work really ought to be fun. And so for the individual, I found in organizations that I've worked with a lot of, I would call closely held companies, anywhere from 10 to $100 million companies. And very often I find after an initial success, they sometimes have a hard time finding growth or healthy growth. And very often what they need is increased capacity, not just equipment or materials, but really leadership capacity at all levels. And I think that's what really motivated me to really get interested in this. I'm an industrial engineer by background and got my doctorate in adult education in business. And I found that by helping companies increase their capacity to grow healthy really requires leadership. And it's more than a title, it's really an attitude. And I really find that a large number of people in organizations really want to perform well. They want to help their company. And it's really a partnership between the individual and their company.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. I think that is really true. And I think that when the leadership sort of approaches with that belief, they get a lot more, and so do the employees. Like everybody wins, right? And creativity flows.
Absolutely. I found when I first got out of school, I worked as an industrial engineer in an organization, and I learned a lot. And I spent a lot of time out on the floor, and I came from a working class family. And I was talking to these people who were running this equipment, and I found they had a tremendous amount of creativity that was bottled up, and they would use it for their hobbies and things like that. And I said, boy, if we could just harness some of this creativity, because they were good people who really wanted not only to succeed themselves, but wanted the company to succeed. And so it was this interest that really started for me to how do we really include them more intimately into their organization.
Yeah, it is. I just think it is so incredibly important. And so what are some of the tools of self-management and accountability?
Well, the tools and these have developed over the years. The first tool that I have taught is what we call a performance agreement. And a performance agreement is different than a job description. It is really a document that communicates a person's job mission, their guiding principles, and their commitments to their key relationships, their internal customers. And we create that by doing two things. One is I help people to, first thing, discover their own strengths and capabilities, and a number of exercises I can do with that. And then I have them identify and then go out and interview their key relationships in that company. So their boss is only one of them. It might be a member of their team. It might be another part of the organization that they provide services to. and I teach them how to do the interviews. And actually, this started really with my work with companies doing strategy. So the process I used to help an individual develop a performance agreement is very similar to the process I use to help companies develop strategy. And have go out and interview their customers, determine what their key corporate competencies are and things like that. And so then I showed them how to put it together. So at the end of the performance agreement, there is a scorecard that they develop. They make clear commitments, what they're going to do. They have goals, and they do this in collaboration with their immediate boss, but also with their other key relationships. And so not only do they create a document that's going to guide them, help them on self-management, but also I've found that it's a great way to develop healthy work relationships with people they work with. So that's the first one. That's kind of the granddaddy of all the tools. It takes a while to do it, but that's an important one. The second tool I teach is I call the goal achievement model. I find people sometimes are better at setting goals than achieving goals. And so what happens is I find they start at the wrong place. Very often we set goals because maybe we have a problem or we have an issue we want to do. And I find instead of starting people with the problem, I start them with the vision of what they want to achieve first. And then we back into the current reality. And it's just that different approach, starting with the vision and then going to current reality, that really helps them develop an action plan that is doable. Then I have a third tool I call the priority feedback system, which is one in which the person proactively manages the communication with their boss. I have found it's much easier to teach a person to manage the relationship with the boss than the other way around. And I teach them how to have regular communication with them, meetings with them. They prepare the agenda. Now they agree on the format of the agenda ahead of time, but they come in prepared to say, here's what I committed to over the last 2 weeks or a month. Here's what I did. And it gives a chance now for the boss to play a much more collegial and coaching role instead of having to generate the discussion. Then the fourth tool is an individual learning plan, really teach people how to develop their own learning plan and to manage it and find their own coaches and find their mentors. And as important as it is for companies to provide training and development opportunities, it's also important for the individual to take the lead on that. And then the final tool, the fifth tool, is called the performance portfolio. So I teach people actually how to keep track of all their successes and challenges and even things they didn't do so well throughout the year. So they go into their performance appraisal that they're playing a role of saying, here's what I said I was going to do in the performance agreement, and here's what I did. And then that generates a conversation which is much more productive than the gotcha conversations that often happens with traditional performance appraisal. So that's a kind of a quick overview of the 5 tools. And these developed over years. I just didn't have an insight. And I found they're very effective. And in using these tools, people start self-managing.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why is it that it is easier for the employee to take the reins for having the meeting with their boss than the other way around?
Well, one thing, it's sheer numbers. An employee the employee has one boss, and the boss might have several people, 10, 20 people. I'm working now with a company that the boss has like 20 people reporting to him. That's probably a problem too. And so part of it is just numbers. Part of it is just numbers. Second thing is when the employee, the job holder, runs the meeting, the boss doesn't have to do much preparation. So when I teach this to people, I always invite the boss to that teaching and have them set up their first meeting. And all the boss has to do is keep a folder of the minutes of the last meeting, their performance agreement, and the person comes in, they're prepared. And I'll have to tell you, the boss loves it. when people do that. And it also, if there's a performance problem, it's much easier for the boss to respond to the person than bring it up. I find very often bosses don't want to bring the bad news, so they kind of, mull it over and they ignore it, or they try to make hints. And I said, let's stop hinting. You bring it up.
Yeah.
And those things changes that meeting significantly. And I find
that's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's really easy to teach. I could teach it in 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Wow.
And then I have them set up the first meeting when I'm teaching them.
Yeah.
And this is not a performance appraisal. Okay, performance appraisals are done once a year or once a quarter. This is something that typically happens maybe once a week, up to once a month, but it's normally in a short-term time frame, and that gives the people a chance to make adjustments. So, for example, let's say I'm coming in and you're my boss, and I'm reviewing what I did over the last 2 weeks, and then after that, I'm going to say, Diane, over the next 2 weeks, here are some of the priorities that I see, but you've got some information about an issue that came up that I didn't know, and I said, you said, Michael, I could see the order you have, but I really would like to have you work on this one first because and I'll explain why. That's much easier to do, and so it helps the boss bring information to the table and not have the person try to read your mind about what's important.
Yeah, and do you find that, I think part of what you're saying, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like part of what you're saying is the boss has got a lot of things to keep track of and people to keep track of, so it feels to me like it would be easier for a boss to think they had said something they hadn't said, or shared information that they hadn't shared. So if the employee is taking the lead, then it's easier for the boss to sort of sort through the information and respond in a way that is more productive and forward-moving.
Absolutely. That you hit it right on the head. When I've taught this tool, typically when the first few meetings they have, the conversation is kind of 50-50, and then after they do it for a while, the percentage of time the boss talks gets lower and lower. And that surprises people sometimes, and it might even be 80-20 or 70-30. And the reason it gets lower is that the individual starts to anticipate the boss's questions, because the biggest role the boss plays in these meetings is asking questions. So why do you think that's the most priority? Or what obstacles you see standing in your way that might stop you from getting your goal? Or those types of questions. And then after a while, the person starts anticipating these and starts answering them ahead of time. And it really leads to a much higher level communication and a better communication. And also it's much easier for the boss to do good coaching if the person initiates the issue. But the boss can always initiate it. The boss says, at our next meeting, Diane, I would like to have you talk about the following. Why don't you bring in a copy of your development plan, and let's spend a little time on that, Or I know we're having a problem with this area here. Why don't you do some analysis there and bring that to me? So the boss is not passive, but they are responders instead of initiators.
Yeah, right. I get it. Wow, this is really interesting. I'm going to take a quick sponsor break so then we can continue the conversation.
You bet.
Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, you are probably aware that Audible.com is a leading provider of audiobooks. They have thousands of titles of audiobooks that you can choose from in all different genres. What you might not know is that they also have podcasts, Audible originals, news, guided meditations. So there's just a huge variety of content that you can choose from that you can listen to, and you can listen to it cross-platform, which is one of my favorite parts of Audible, is that you can pick it up right where you left off, no matter where you were listening. A lot of the guests who have been on this podcast have audiobooks on Audible. One that comes to mind is Culture Spark by Jason Richmond. He was just recently on. But I got to say that currently one of my favorite things is the guided meditations. Because, keeping the vibration down right now is pretty important. So, I think you should check it out for yourself if you haven't already. And so we're going to give you a free trial. And if you go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you can sign up for that trial. And then you can explore around, the variety of audiobooks and the programs and see what resonates with you. Today we're speaking with Dr. Michael Colburn about building a culture of self-management and accountability. Michael, I'm curious if there are any risks in creating a self-managed culture.
Well, yes, there is. Of course, the biggest risk is not doing it in terms of if you have highly motivated people who really want to self-manage and you set up barriers for that self-management, they're very marketable when they go some other place. Mm-hmm. However, the one risk that there is, I've helped some of my clients, particularly working with the CEOs, to select and find really good people. And I had this one, when I do this work through these self-management tools, particularly with some top people, I always tell the top person is, when I help them assess their strengths and find out what they're good at and take charge of that, they may find out that this is not the company for them. So you really got to know that, because high-performing people have choices. And so I let them know that up front. And so there is a possibility, and particularly I found this with like smaller and medium-sized companies that may not have a lot of options, and I said, this is something that might happen. And so you need to understand that. Now, I'll tell you one story. I had this one client and I worked with for a number of years who went from a $15 million company to about 85. And so around the middle, when they hit about 50 million, they really realized they needed a business development person. And he brought in this friend of his who was very talented, very good person. And the CEO asked me to work with him to develop his performance agreement. This was after a few months. And I kept working with him, and he assessed his strengths, and he interviewed his internal customers and did all that sort of thing. And then I would send him to his boss saying, well, go share that with Dan and see what he thinks about it and kind of negotiate it. And they both had high respect for each other. They really liked each other. They were both high performers. And I remember after doing this, and I met with this person several times, particularly in this performance agreement, and he said to me, he says, Michael, I think the world of Dan, but the job he has me in is not the job that I need to be doing. And I understand he pays me well and he treats me well, but there's no place in this organization for me to do what I really do well. And so he went to the CEO and he resigned.
Wow.
and so Dan, who the CEO who I've worked with a lot, he was really ticked off at me initially.
Yeah.
And so I felt like a counselor, so I just let him vent, and I didn't even say, do you remember what I told you, but later on, he came back to me, and I really like this guy, and he's an exceptional CEO. And he said to me, he says, Michael, I know you told me that this might happen, and I have talked with Randy, and, I hate to lose him, but it's probably best for him. And so that showed me a lot about the CEO. And anyway, the final part of the story was about 6 months later. I had lunch with Randy, the fellow who resigned. He and I just got together for lunch. he looked 10 years younger.
Wow.
Because he was working so hard. He was, it wasn't that he wasn't even performing well, but he was just not where he should have been. And I saw him and I thought he was 10 years younger. And so even when you lose a good person and you do it the way my friend Dan, the CEO, did, there's always good feelings about the company, And
yeah, right.
And so it's sad, but at the same time, Dan was the type of person, CEO, who wanted the best for all of his people, and I really respect him a lot for that. And you never know how that's going to come back in a positive way to you, even when they leave.
Yeah, definitely.
That's my story on that.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for sharing it. That's really great.
Yeah.
Really drives home the point too. So
yeah,
I really appreciate it. Okay, so so if there's somebody listening and they're the leader of an organization and they would love it if people were self-managing, but they don't really know how to get started, right? Like, so what are things that top leaders really need to do to build this sort of culture and sustain this sort of culture?
Well, the last chapter of my book, my whole book I wrote to the job holder, the person in their job holder role, but I saved the last chapter to really answer the question you just asked me, and basically what I tell them is the best thing you can do to build a culture of self-management is to use the tools yourself. Just because you are an executive for the company doesn't mean that you don't need self-management or you're automatically self-managing yourself anyway. And so if I'm working with an organization, I will start with some of the top people, or at least the people who really want it the most. And I said, if you really want to build a culture of self-management, let them see it in you, So for example, who knows what the boss's goals are, And I don't mean organizational goals. I mean, what is your contribution, Mr. President or Ms. President, to help the organization make those goals? And so I have them, so I'll work with them on their own, and then I'll have them make them public, and then also do a quarterly review of their performance. What a powerful way for people to demonstrate, leaders to demonstrate to their people of they're doing the things that they want them to do. And I think when they do that, that's the best thing a leader can do to encourage a culture of self-management, because a culture is built by behaviors, and it's built by behaviors that people see in their leaders to a large degree.
Is that hard for some business owners and business leaders to do?
Sure. It's sometimes perceived as hard because to admit to for example, a performance breakdown might be seen by somebody as a weakness. However, I think we see this in people that when you find people who can do that, it quite frankly has the opposite thing, that people have a great admiration when people can admit to a problem or a breakdown in themselves. So there is that risk that how will people see this, or it's a perceived risk, but it's not a real risk. So what I'll do is I'll let them take a step at a time to try it out, and then what happens is if they start doing it, then I may come in and work with them and do a kind of introductory workshop on one or more of the tools. And one of the other risks that we have is when the top person really believes in this and they start using it themselves, they'll say, I want everybody in my organization to be doing this. And I'll say, no. I said, if we're dealing with self-management, people have to choose to come in to do it, Now, they're going to be required to perform, so we're not getting that way there, but I would never, ever suggest to an organization that they make people use these tools. Just give them opportunity. And so putting together workshops for everybody in the organization. I'll put together workshops or do things like that, or study groups to help people understand the tools. But then after that, then if they really want to get into it, then they really have to ask to be into it, you know. And I find that they will be more influenced by their peers doing it, you know. So I tell the leader, the manager of a department, for example, is don't offer this to the people who need it the most. Offer it to the people who want it the most, and then they will pull along. They will pull along the other people much more than the boss can.
Okay, but that leads me to another question, which is everyone in an organization able and willing to self-manage, do you think?
Well, the short answer is no.
Okay.
I think the vast majority of people are capable of self-management, but whether or not they are at this time able and willing to do it is really quite another thing. When I was working on my graduate work at Ohio State, I did some research and looked at why do some people, when I was teaching goal setting and time management, so I was doing some of the tools that, it was prior to me developing all 5 tools. And I was wondering, says, why do some people just eat this stuff up and get a lot out of it? And some of the things I teach, people get frustrated, you know? And so I did my research, and what I learned was, one of the things I learned was, there are things about the job that make it more applicable to use all my tools. So for example, if you have a job that's highly routine, that you have very few choices in how to do things, if I teach you some of the things that I teach, particularly in the performance agreement, you're going to get frustrated because you can't do it. And so I found that the jobs that had 3 characteristics were the ones that were the sweet spot. The one characteristic is task significance. In other words, I'm doing something that really counts, that's really having an impact. The second one is autonomy, and not so much autonomy about the goals, but the autonomy about how I do my job. And so when people have a relatively high autonomy, that's good. And the third thing is feedback. And I don't mean personal feedback, I mean feedback that's provided by the job itself. So if you have I have a friend who's an artist, well, he knows when he makes mistakes that he made a mistake, you know, or a mechanic, or when I worked as an engineer. So what happens is it's a natural feedback that you get from your job. When a job is high in all those 3 characteristics, that's a very plus sign. So I always have people do this assessment ahead of time. And then the 4th characteristic is not a job characteristic, but it's an individual characteristic. It's internal growth need. Internal growth need is really how important is your job to your motivation to important to you. So for example, for me, my job was always high in importance, even when I first got out of college. And so when that's high and those other 3 things are high, that's a sweet spot, you know. So that's kind of, that's just one of the characteristics that I find that's fairly predictable that people who do it. So if I have someone who wants to be involved with this and we do this assessment and they're low on some of those, sometimes I will work with them and their boss to maybe increase the job enrichment so it would be a little bit higher in those other characteristics.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's really interesting. Yeah.
But I have to watch. Right. I have to watch out for people who get almost too enthusiastic about what I'm teaching, you know, because if you force people to go into it, we've kind of we've missed the point. You know? Yeah.
It is about self-management.
That's all. Right, and it starts there. You know? Right.
It's really funny. Okay. So, so it sounds to me like the leader really has to do an assessment of, well, that's not what I want to ask. Here's my question. If it's an organization where all of those points are met for some of the staff, but not for all of the staff, like there's a bunch of people who really don't have autonomy over how they do what they do,
Right.
can you still create a culture of self-management and accountability in the organization as a whole, or just like in certain departments?
No, I think you can. Let me tell you one thing I found by using these tools. I'm finding that some of the tools are applicable to a larger range of people. The performance agreement, probably not. Performance agreement is something that if it's really needs to give people a little bit more control over the job. However, people can set goals, have a learning plan, and even have communication with their boss in jobs that maybe are less than ideal. So what I've found is if I would teach those tools to those people, and then I'll even modify the tools a bit. So for example, people who are in jobs that are less enriching, when I do goal setting, I might focus a little bit more on short-term goals, as opposed to the more strategic goals or time management, short-term, that sort of thing. And then I will work with the boss of the area. Let's say we have a job that's fairly routine. Then I might talk with the leader of the organization saying, is this really what you want out of that job? And sometimes we might go into a job design process and include the people in that process there. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities to increase people's engagement, which and let them self-manage to the degree that they can, not put too many expectations. And I think if we do that sort of thing, I think you can build a culture throughout the organization. It would look a little differently for different jobs.
Yeah, but that's really interesting because then that sounds to me like it's really a matter of being able to really look at the organization as a whole and look for opportunities to be able to implement on some level.
Absolutely. You got it.
Yeah, that's really, this is really so interesting. Will you, and I really appreciate you joining me to share this information. It's enlightening. Will you share with the listeners, how they can find you and your book and
Sure.
anything else you got going on?
Yes, I have a web page, and the web page has information of how to get the book, and also I have some blogs on it and some other information. It's www.michaelcolburn, PhD, no spaces, .com. And that will, and also they can click on that and about the book, and that will take them to Amazon. And the book is available through Amazon with Own Your Job, Michael Colburn. So if they go to my website, that will lead them around to the book, and they can read even a chapter of the book and things like that. And more than happy to, and if people want to contact me directly, my Gmail is dr.mjcolburn@gmail.com. I would love to hear from them, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you again. I appreciate the conversation. And listeners, thank you. And I'd also like to thank audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth to sign up for a free trial and check out the audiobooks and the other programs that are available to you there. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Hey guys, this is Gabby Douglas. If you have an active lifestyle like me, hydration is key. That's why I love the Hydration Watermelon Smoothie from Smoothie King. Blended with whole fruits, coconut water, and more electrolytes than some of the leading sports drinks, Hydration Watermelon is the cleaner way to hydrate with no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. So you can recover and perform at your peak ability during the summer heat. Order online or through the app for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King, rule the day.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast-forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh, man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Are you tired of the same old productivity hacks? Have you read the top 20 books on effectiveness, and yet your workdays and email inbox still causing anxiety, burnout, and even depression? Ready to learn the latest in brain-based modalities, techniques, and technologies to optimize your success and well-being? Welcome to the Focus to Evolve podcast, where we'll illuminate your path to spacious productivity and balanced thriving. Each week, we dive into deeply insightful and immediately impactful methods to help you become highly effective while promoting health, profitability, and well-being. Say goodbye to the trance of busyness and hello to your highest potential. It's time to discover a new way of accelerating your mission, growth, and purpose. Join us on the Focus to Evolve podcast and get ready to live your most joyful, productive, and fulfilling life.